Hello again, I'm Mike Blackston, and this is Road Noise, episode number 6. In this episode, I'm going to talk about building 2 life-size nutcrackers, and you can too. I started a blog this past week, and I'm going to tell you how I did it and how you can too. I'm getting healthy again. I've gotten back into walking, so I'm going to talk about getting healthy, and you can too. And I'm going to tell you all about how I performed ingrown toenail surgery successfully, all by myself, and you can too, but you probably shouldn't. That's all coming up in this episode of Road Noise, life 1 mile at a time. Well, hi again, I'm Mike Blackston. I'm your host for Road Noise, life 1 mile at a time. I'm driving down the interstate through Columbia, South Carolina. Just got off of a long weekend-ish business trip where I was doing my etching for someone on the coast of South Carolina. One of my very best customers, and had a lot more work when I got there than I thought I was going to have. And so it's a Saturday afternoon as I drive down the road on Highway 20 going west towards home. If you're wondering what those sounds in the background of my voice are, well, that's the sounds of the road, because I'm doing this as I drive. I've got a microphone with me, and I'm commuting, so you're in the passenger seat with me as we learn to live life 1 mile at a time. And I'm a little bit late getting this episode released. I usually like to release them on Friday afternoons, or sometime on a Friday, whether it's morning or afternoon, but I didn't get a chance to, and it's already now Saturday afternoon, and I'm just recording it. And here's what happened. I had a couple already recorded that I was planning on releasing. I thought I was ahead of the game, but I had to I've actually, in the past couple of weeks, made a couple of really hard decisions for me. As an artist, I have a really hard time letting go of the things I create. And this week, I've decided that after listening back, because normally when I record stuff ahead of time for the podcast, I'll listen back to it just before I release it to make sure that there's nothing at the last minute that I need to either edit out or fix, or maybe come on at the beginning of the podcast and tell you some information about or something like that. And there's been a few of those because I've recorded them in advance, several of them, and I even told you in the last couple of podcasts that I had a couple more coming, and I do have them still in the database on my computer. But I made the decision after listening to the next one that was up and realized that I was rehashing a lot of stuff I had already told you. I was talking a lot about the upcoming Harry Potter Universal Studios trip, which I then recorded and released a fresh podcast giving you a complete rundown of that trip. So it just was kind of redundant when I talked about it in there. There was another segment of the one I was going to release this week that talked about my wife starting a business, and since that recording, she has actually decided that that business was not for her. And so although she is still doing some of it while she's working on getting employment somewhere, she's in serious talks with a large corporation, she's probably not going to continue doing that very long. And so I didn't want to go into that. It's just a whole lot of stuff. And I realized, I said, you know what? I recorded all of this stuff early in the idea that I would have podcasts under my belt, so that when I had a tough week and I had a lot going on, all I had to do was pop in one that was already recorded and I was good to go. But as this podcast is evolving, I'm realizing I want it to be as fresh as it possibly can every time I release one. And that means not having to come on every time and say, the following audio that you're about to hear was recorded 3 months ago, which is something that I have done on a couple of occasions with the releases on this. So I made the hard decision that the one that I was going to release today or yesterday, and another one that I recorded while I was on the way to Chattanooga, I'm not going to release them. I'm going to use them. I've retitled them as Peace Out or Peace Apart episodes. In other words, if I have something going on where I can't record something and I know that I'm going to have to release something, but I don't have an opportunity to record, and I don't see that really happening too much or even at all, but it's a possibility, then I can go back on those and at least pick out a thing here, an item, a topic there, and put it together almost like a best of, but it would be something you hadn't heard before. So I'm going to keep that audio, but I'm not going to plan on releasing it. It really wasn't anything I think that you would be all that interested in, and it's old. It's old news, and I don't want to do that. I want to start right now planning on every week releasing a podcast that was just recorded within a day or two, so that you stay fresh. If I'm going to talk to you about my life and I'm going to give you an inside look at the goings on in my life, then I think it needs to be fresh for you. Now, of course, if you're coming to this and if I've kept this podcast alive for many, many, many episodes, and you start doing like I tend to do when I find a podcast that I like and I'll binge listen, then obviously the ones from previous weeks are going to have been well gone by, time gone by the time you listen to them. But that's understandable. I mean, that's understood when you start listening to past episodes. But those of you, again, who are subscribed to the podcast and looking forward to hearing the new one as it comes out, I want it to be fresh. So that's enough of that. That's the first hard decision that I made. No, I take it back. It's the second hard decision I made, and it was this week. But in the last couple of weeks, I've made a very hard decision, and it really probably wouldn't seem like all that hard a decision, but it's something that I've been going on about for about 5 years now, and I just decided to drop it finally altogether, and that is my pet memorial business idea. For the last several years, I'm rounding it to about 5, but it could have been more than that. I can't remember. I've had an idea of doing pet memorials and making that not only a side business for what I do, but eventually running that part of the business to the point that it would take over the main focus of my business, because I love animals and I love pets so much, and it is a need. The pet memorial business is a need, but in order to make that business grow and run the way it would need to, I would need to basically stop what I'm doing with the other company and focus only on that. And I can't afford to do it. I have found through trial and error and trying to start it up 2 or 3 times before, I always run into roadblocks. And while I'm not giving up on entrepreneurship, there just comes a time when you've got a business idea, or it doesn't even have to be business. And a lot of times when you've got an idea, this great idea that you think is going to work, even if there is a market for it, sometimes it just is not built to work in your current circumstance. And that's the way it is for me with this. And that's okay. It's not giving up on being a business owner and crafting new products. It's just this one is not going to work for me. And I have finally decided to drop it all together. And it really is a sense of freedom, because over these past several years, it's always been in the back of my mind. People are tired of hearing me say, once I get the pet business started up, once I get the pet memorial side of my business going, this and that. Well, I finally tried it. I tried 2 different launches at 2 different times, and I just don't have the time to put into it and do the full-time work that I do running the company that I have built without having to hire somebody whose job it is just to promote that. Now, I could do that. I could hire someone and say, look, I'm going to pay you on a commission basis. You get this much out of everyone you sell, and have someone who is just primarily focused on selling pet memorials. And I have some business models I think that would work and make that happen. However, I don't want to do that. I really don't think I want to do that. I'm not at that stage of the game where I want to start taking on employees. Let me get out of this other lane because my voice is going to start wobbling, because the other lane seems to be smoother. So that was my other big decision in the last couple of weeks that I've had to make, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of making that decision, because I didn't know, I hold on like a bulldog when I want to do something and I have this great idea and I think it is marketable and I think it's a It's useful the way I was going to do it. I was going to use spare materials that I could get for free, and everything was going to work fine. On paper, it seemed perfect. And with someone who has nothing to lose, someone who has nothing but time, it would be a great idea. But for someone like me, who is a sole business owner and the sole employee of my business, I have to run the business and work the business, and that doesn't leave a whole lot of time for marketing a new product. At least something that is a product you would really need to market during the day and get your feet on the ground. So I'm going to start focusing on more internet type stuff as far as side projects. My business that I'm running is going great, and I have no problems with it, no complaints. But at the same time, I, as an entrepreneurial-minded person, am constantly wanting to find new avenues to create income. It's not that I'm greedy, I enjoy it. I enjoy thinking about how could I make a profit on this? How could I increase the blessings for my family and for others as well, because the more I make, the more I'm able to help others, and I really have a passion for that. And so it's just a part of me, and I think anybody who is an entrepreneurial mindset or spirit can understand where I'm coming from when I go down that road. But enough of that. That's the pet memorials and the pre-recorded audio. All of that is going bye-bye. This is fresh. Today I'm recording this. It is Saturday, and I'm hoping by the time I get where I'm going, it will be almost ready to release everything I've got. I've got my workflow really fairly well rounded out and efficient on my computer, on my laptop, where I can record everything straight into it, do all the editing and everything straight to it, then upload. It should be fairly easy to do. We'll just see if I have the time to make a stop and get the processes rolling. The processes can be rolling while I'm in the car. I'll just have to use my phone as a mobile hotspot, which I don't generally like to do because that uses up so much data, but in order to get the podcast uploaded, I may do that anyway if I've still, depending on how fast this goes. So, all of that to say, all of that introduction before I get to the meat of this podcast, and that's one of the great things I love about this podcast, is that I can just sit here and ramble, because the whole point is that you're listening to me ramble before I get to the topics. But I guess you would like to hear the topics that I teased at the beginning in the intro, if those were in fact what made you decide to keep listening. So let's talk about the first one I listed, which was a DIY project that my sister and I had the opportunity to build on Monday. My sister is an artist like I am, and she and I work really well together and have a fun time when we build things together. She normally helps me build sets when I do my shows, and there have been so many hours over the years that she and I have just spent quality time with each other, brother and sister, getting to know each other better, having fun, having some laughs, getting into some really deep, meaningful conversations while we created something. And like I said, normally it's a set. This time they were props. Now, if you don't know what DIY is, and I think most people in this digital age know exactly what DIY is, it's do it yourself. And I very much enjoy do-it-yourself projects. It's one of those things that it doesn't necessarily have to be cheaper than what I could buy. I just enjoy creating stuff and saying, look, I did that, and the fun of the process. It's just a joy for me, and it is for Stephanie, my sister, as well. And so the props that I wanted were for a Christmas concert that we're going to be doing at the Elbert Theater right before Christmas. It's a concert called A Prelude to Christmas, and I want to dress up the stage really nice. It's not going to be a show where we do a lot of blocking and walking around and stuff. It's just all a concert. There'll be 3 microphones there, and the group will work around the 3 microphones, and I just want to dress the stage up really nice and build a nice stationary set that just is pleasing to the eye, but at the same time makes people go, wow, that's neat. So I decided I wanted to build life-size Nutcrackers. one of my favorite images of the holiday and Christmas season are the Nutcrackers, and you see them everywhere, and you can go to the dollar store and buy, $3 or $4 Nutcracker and put it on your mantle, and those are fine, and I have some of those, but I wanted a life-size one for each side of the stage, and I said there's got to be people who have done that, and there have to be do-it-yourself Instructables on the internet. I keep passing these trucks on my right here. It's a big, long army convoy of either there's one, I think it's a National Guard convoy of big military trucks. They've turned off now. But I wanted to do Nutcracker life-size do-it-yourself projects, and when I told my sister about it, she went, ooh, I want to be a part of that too. I said, okay. So what we did was we decided to find out exactly how we wanted to do it, find out if there was an Instructable that told us exactly what to do, or something maybe we could modify online, and we got started looking, and we settled on one basic YouTube video, and I will put it in the links. I will put a link to it in the show notes. If you'll go to roadnoisepodcast.com and look at this episode, there will be just a short brief. I don't write a whole lot of show notes for this particular podcast because it's just no point in doing it. You can just listen to the podcast, but I will put the link to the show notes in the Instructable. It's a YouTube video that we watched. We made some modifications to it, and my sister actually, during the entire time, took a time lapse of she and I working on this project, and hopefully I'll be able to put that on as well. I don't know if I can or not. But anyway, I will get that on the show notes, and you can look and decide if you want to do one yourself. And I'll put the finished product, photos of the finished product, on the show notes as well for the project that Stephanie and I did, and you'll be able to see how we're going to frame our stage. But it was really fun, but it was a lot of work. These things are over 6 feet tall, just over 6 feet tall. They're made from flower pots, from the plastic flower pots, basically, that you can buy. We got the torsos at Walmart, and did we get... the arms and the legs were built by using PVC pipe. The legs were, I think, 4-inch round PVC pipe, and the arms were 3-inch round PVC pipe. And we used those, and then what did we do for the hands? I can't remember what. I know what we did for the hands. We went to Dollar General, and we thought we wanted to find some of the small plastic flower pots for the shoulder garnishment of the soldiers. But when we got to the Dollar Tree, we went over to the Christmas section and found these small aluminum metal pails. They were bright metallic green. They were beautiful, and they would be perfect garnish for the shoulder area and cuffs of the gloves. And we ended up using those, and they were $1 a piece. You couldn't beat that. It turns out the cost for each one ended up being, by the time we bought all the paint and all the materials that we needed, the cost for each one ended up being about $95 a piece. I think when I turned in the receipts to the theater, because they'll be keeping them, and so they're reimbursing us for the materials, it was $190, and we built 2 of them, so $95 a piece. Built one life-size Nutcracker. And if you'll go to roadnoisepodcast.com and look on the page, if it's not there, be patient, just keep checking back, because one thing that I will say is I won't be able to get the website up and go until probably tomorrow, as far as being updated with this new episode. So if you're listening to this overnight, you might want to wait till Sunday to go to roadnoisepodcast.com, but it will be there in the next couple of days, and you'll see the final product. But we had so much fun. We did it on the front porch of my mom's house. We decided we were going to meet Monday morning, look at the Instructable we had decided on, and make the adjustments that we needed to make. Now, there were a couple of things that we ended up having to do differently from what they said on the show. because the Instructable we watched was a segment from some, like a morning TV show, like a Good Morning America type thing, where they had some guy like, here's what you can do at Christmas time. You can do it with your kids for next to nothing. And it was great, but we had to modify some things. A couple of things didn't work. For one thing, they used 5-gallon buckets with lids on them. We didn't. We used flower pots because we just liked the way it shaped the torso better. It gave it more of that hourglass type of shape, and it was better. We also made a fatter head for the head. We used a flower pot for that. Instead of giving it a neck and a small head like they do on this Instructable, we wanted more of the Nutcracker with the chompy teeth, because the whole point of a Nutcracker is that you put the nut in the teeth of a real Nutcracker, press the lever, and it cracks the nut. So they've got those big zombie-looking teeth. We wanted that. We wanted it to look like a real Nutcracker. Well, the Instructable gives it a neck and uses a little bucket, little small, almost the size of one of the larger coffee buckets, Folgers canister type thing. And they painted it flesh tone and put a hat on it, put eyes and a nose on it, but it didn't have any teeth. It didn't have the teeth. It wasn't an actual Nutcracker. It was just a soldier. It was a Christmas soldier. So we modified that. We used a bigger bucket or a bigger flower pot and turned it upside down, and it worked really well. And so one of the things that we noticed right away in the Instructable, you'll see that a hot glue gun is the way that the guy put it all together. He used screws in a couple of spots, but he pretty much put most of it together with a hot glue gun. And we're thinking, great, we've got a hot glue gun and plenty of glue, and we bought a little bit of extra glue, and we've got it. So we'll do this. Well, when we started putting it together, we realized right away the thing's too heavy for the glue to hold. It would hold in a pinch. If you want to build one every year, it'll hold enough, but we were going to be moving these things around quite a bit, getting them set every night, making sure nothing has moved, making sure for one thing, we were building them in South Carolina, the theater's in Georgia, and I'm going to have to move them both this weekend in my car. They're sitting in my mom's living room right now, and I don't think she's real happy about that, because there are two very large soldiers in her living room. So we needed them to be more sturdy. So I ended up having to use wood screws that I had on me, and I had brought my drill because I knew that I was probably going to end up using it a lot. And so I'm going to put that Instructable on the website on roadnoisepodcast.com, and you can just look at the show notes. I'm also going to build a resource page so that not only will these videos and things that I reference and that I'm going to tell you I'm going to put in show notes will be there in the show notes, but you'll also be able to just go straight to a resource page later. And because if you're like telling somebody about it and you think, hey, I can't remember which episode that was, and I don't feel like looking through all the episodes to see which one that was, you can just go straight to the resource page, and it'll be there as well too, if you maybe want to show somebody or something like that, or go back to it for your own reference. So that'll be coming. So that was fun. My sister and I had a really good time. There was a learning process, but one thing I have learned as I have built things with my sister over the years is that she and I work so well together, we learn, and we get quicker and quicker every time, and much more efficient each time we do something. And we learned a lot from this. One of the things that I learned, just as an example, if you'd like to build them yourself, go ahead and invest in screws and a drill. It doesn't have to be a big drill. As a matter of fact, if you happen to have one of those small drills that is just like a little small handheld drill that people use inside the house and stuff, that would probably work a lot better than what I had, because I had a big corded power drill. It was hard to get it in and around some of the spaces that I needed to. It was kind of unwieldy that way and bulky. So if you have access to a smaller screwdriver, maybe a handheld screwdriver or electric screwdriver, that would be good, because you're dealing with plastic. You're dealing with just those plastic flower pots. I would suggest you drill pilot holes in everything first. It makes everything so much easier if you just take a small drill bit, find out exactly where everything's got to be connected together with a screw, and go ahead and drill your pilot holes. Then line them up, put the screw in, and you're good. That will save you some time and trouble. And I kept finding places that I needed to drill pilot holes, and then I'd have to take out the bit, and it's not that hard because it's a screw chuck on the front of my drill, so it wasn't that hard to do, but it takes time. Every time you have to take your bit out and replace it with the drill bit, and then take that drill bit out and replace it with a screwdriver bit and all this stuff. So just keep that in mind. Another thing you might want to keep in mind is to invest in a more stable paint. We decided, since this was coming out of our pockets and it was going to be props, both of us weren't necessarily wanting to go with the most expensive cans of paint because we knew they were props and they could be touched up as we went if we had to, and the money was coming out of our pockets at first, but we really weren't wanting to spend that kind of money on it other than temporarily. And I also was spending it for the theater, and I wasn't sure how much they wanted to spend. If you're building it for yourself and you're wanting these to last for a good long time, go ahead and spend a little bit extra money. You know, we spent $1.50 on a can of paint. You might buy the $3.50, $4 cans of paint, the Krylon and stuff like that, and just give it a chance to dry. That was what happened with us. Even we bought the cheapest paint we could buy, and you spray that on there, and yeah, it dries fairly fast, but as soon as the moisture from your fingers touches it, then you're gonna peel it right back off. And so we used red, we used light pink for the skin, we used black. And looking at it later, we realized we should have gone with blue for the tops of the legs and then black for the bottom so that it would look like he was doing wearing boots. But that was a little too late and we didn't feel like going. I may make that change later on when I get them at the theater. I may get some blue spray paint if they've got it and go ahead, tape it off and spray it and just do that. But anyway, like I said, we had a great time with it. Just do a little bit of planning in advance. Use a good paint, drill your pilot holes, and it might be a good idea to allow yourself a couple of days to build it. And what you would want to do is get all of your materials together, decide what's going to be painted what color, is going to go on each piece, and go ahead and do the painting first, the first day, and then allow it to dry for 24 hours. I think that was one of our biggest mistakes, was that we didn't allow it to dry for 24 hours, and we kept having to go back and retouch up the paint as we went along and we're doing the build. If you allow it to dry for 24 hours and use a good quality paint, you should not have that problem, and you might even give it a couple of coats if you really want to put some money into it. But I think we ended up using 3 or 4 cans of red paint, so that can get kind of expensive. Depends on what your budget is. But, you can always up the ante and take your project to a higher level than we did. These were our first ones, and if I do them again, and I suspect I may have a couple of people ask me to, first of all, they're not going to be cheap, and second of all, I will use better paint and a little better planning, give myself a little more time to do it. But we did them both on Monday, started at 10 o'clock, finished at 11 o'clock that night, only took a couple of breaks, and worked through that entire time, but we got 2 of them built. So go to roadnoisepodcast.com and have a look at the show notes and look for the resource page and see if I've gotten it up there, and you can have a look at the final products for those Nutcrackers. Okay, second of all, I want to talk about my brand new literary project. It's another piece to the puzzle of branding myself. No, I'm not taking a hot piece of metal and sticking it to my skin. I'm branding Michael Blackston, because that's part of what this podcast is. When I first started looking into marketing and trying to get your name out there on the internet and stuff like that, I ignored the advice of a few of the people who said brand yourself, so that whatever you're involved with, your name is recognized. You don't have to change that. See, if I first started with the other podcast, Q1 Go, the theater show, and I started branding that, and I spent all of my time branding Q1 Go, and that's great. There needs to be some branding for the show itself, but I started a Q1 Go Facebook page, and I started a Q1 Go or C1G Show Twitter account, and if it's still there, I hardly ever go to it. I need to get more involved with Twitter, but I don't. And one of the reasons I don't is it's so overwhelming when you have more than one account that you feel like you need to keep active and keep stuff fresh coming from. So I've got 2 Twitter accounts, C1G Show, or at C1G Show, and at My Everything Arts. And to back up just a little bit, I actually started branding My Everything Arts before I started branding Q1 Go, because My Everything Arts was my first podcast, or the Everything Arts podcast was my first podcast, and I got, I think, 12 episodes into it before I decided to go away with it. It wasn't working the way I had planned it, and ended up most of the episodes having to do with theater, so I decided to go with Tony King as a co-host, who had joined me for all of my previous theater-themed Everything Arts podcasts. So I asked her if she'd be interested in being a co-host with me for a podcast that was themed only for theater. And she loved the idea, and now we are 20-something, I think 22 episodes at this recording into that podcast. And if you're interested, go to Q1 Go, the theater show, and you can also go to q1go.com and check that out. But I started branding that, and what was getting lost was me. And that's not me being a narcissist or being arrogant, but it becomes a lot of trouble if I have to keep up Q1 Go, the theater show, My Everything Arts, Road Noise podcast, now this new blog that I've got. That starts to become overwhelming, because I'm not the kind of person who makes enough money. Yes, I do run my own business, but I don't make enough money to hire a virtual assistant right now to do that stuff for me. So I started having to take the advice of some of the people that I first listened to when I was first learning to brand, and they said, brand yourself and the other things will follow. Be known for being Michael Blackston. Get people to want to get involved with and obtain content from Michael Blackston, and they'll find Road Noise, the Everything Arts podcast, Q1 Go. And when you do that, you'll have far less effort to have to put into branding, because you're just branding yourself. Yeah, you've got these side things that you have to do. You have to keep marketing your podcasts individually, but not nearly as much as you would do if you were branding each one individual with its own branding plan. For instance, I started a blog, and I got 3 or 4 of them into it with Q1 Go. And I realized I don't just want to write about theater. I want to write about stuff. And I don't want to just write about theater in a serious way. I mean, they all kind of had a comedy feel to them, but I wanted to be me. I wanted to be me. So how am I supposed to put me into the Q1 Go blog, but at the same time keep it focused on theater when there's other things I want to write about? Simple answer. Stop writing on the Q1 Go blog and create Michael Blackston, that blog. And that's what I did. This past week, I created a brand new blog, Michael Blackston. The tagline has changed twice, and I think I might just make the tagline change from time to time. I think that might be a way for people who are subscribed to be interested in what's his tagline now. The first one was the blog that I couldn't think of a good name for, and the second one, as it currently stands, is I write the blogs. But it's just Michael Blackston right now at the top. Michael Blackston, I write the blogs. And it's a comedy blog. That's where my heart is when it comes to writing article type stuff. I am a fiction writer, I'm a playwright, but when I write blog type article stuff, I just like to have fun and be funny. when I was growing up, I read and listened to the comedy of a famous author in the South. He became nationally famous, but he was most famous in the Southeast, especially around the Atlanta area, because he had a column in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and his name was Louis Grizzard. He's since passed. Louis Grizzard. And he was my idol growing up. I loved reading his stuff, and I read every book that he would write articles in the paper, and eventually, this was before the interwebs, and after he had enough articles in the paper, he would pick out the specific ones, and they would put them together in a compilation, and they would release a book. And they would have crazy names, like one of them was, "If I ever get back to Georgia, I'm going to nail my feet to the ground." And actually, that wasn't a book of articles, that was a story. He did two different types of things. He would do books of his articles, but he would also write books, kind of like this podcast, but funny. I mean, I'm not really trying to be funny on the podcast. That's not the idea for this podcast, but those books were funny and sometimes serious, sometimes really bittersweet, especially when he would talk about his father. So some of them, I think, what was the one? Oh, the one that was about sex. And I don't know if all of the articles were put in the AJC. I know some of them were. The one about sex, and I think it might have been one of the first ones I read, was called "Don't Bend Over in the Garden, Granny. You know them taters got eyes." Another one, he told the story of his heart transplant, or not transplant, his heart surgery, open heart surgery, and it was called "They Tore Out My Heart and Stomped That Sucker Flat." They put a pig valve in his heart. Another one was called, I think, "Elvis is Dead and I Don't Feel So Good Myself. Don't sit under the grits tree with anyone else but me. You can't put no boogie woogie on the king of rock and roll." Stupid stuff like that, just crazy names. Now he would be releasing ebooks and writing blogs if he were alive now, but he died well before the internet really got feet and got growing. I said all that because that's who my wife says I remind her of. She began to read Louis Grizzard after she met me, and she read everything he wrote. And a lot of women didn't like him because he was a chauvinist. He did it to be funny. And he had several ex-wives. He was bad to drink, and I think he really was quite chauvinistic in his real life, but he made fun of it in his writing. And one of his wives wrote a book about him called "How to Tame a Wild Boar," where she tells all about being married to Louis Grizzard, and that was a funny book as well. So it was surprising to me, though, because my wife loved his work, and I knew so many women at the time who did not like him at all because he was so chauvinistic. But it was all comedy. It was one of those things, and it was right in the heart of when you had Eddie Murphy up on stage doing Raw and Andrew Dice Clay and all of that stuff. The really edgy comedy where you wouldn't want to take your kid. So something like Louis Grizzard being a bit chauvinistic and really proud of the South and his Georgia Bulldogs, it would rub some people the wrong way, but it was mild compared to that other stuff, and he hardly ever used bad language or anything like that. So I got into it. I fell in love with his work. I read every book. I fell away from it for a while. There was a time in my early teens that I wanted to do exactly what I have started doing. I wanted to write articles. I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to do that stuff. Now I've decided, just got a message from my wife or somebody. Now I've decided I'm going to do that, and I don't have to go be hired by a newspaper. I can start a blog, and I know there have been 5 million blogs, and there will be 5 million more by tomorrow. But a very, very large percent of those people who start blogs write 4 or 5 of them and stop. I'm one of them. I've done it. I'd start a blog, and I would mean well about it, but something would happen, and I would quit. This time I deemed to not let that happen, and so I did a little research, and I read up on what makes a successful blog successful and what makes successful bloggers continue to release their blogs. And it's all about consistency. It's all about being realistic at first and being consistent. The first thing you need to understand is you are not going to release your first blog post and have 1,000 people share it. You're not. It is pulling teeth to get my very, very good true friends on Facebook to share anything that I post. Even these podcasts. Actually don't really push this podcast on Facebook because it's one of those I'm kind of looking to see how organically it can grow without me asking my Facebook friends to do it. But the C1G, Q1 Go the Theater Show, that podcast, pulling teeth to get people to share it. The blog posts, pulling teeth to get people to share them. They'll like them and they'll tell me they're funny and they're hilarious, but people don't like to share things all the time. And especially a blog post like I'm doing, which is article driven. Most shared blog posts are the ones that are heavily photograph driven, the ones where you click through photographs or memes and things like that. And that's not what this is about. This is about literature. This is about writing, creating something, giving somebody a laugh without sticking letters on somebody else's photo. This is about true comic article style of blog and the way that it used to be done. And that's what I'm doing, and I hope that that you will go to it. Now, the way you can get to it right now is Michael Blackston. That's MichaelBlackston.wordpress.com. That's michaelblackston.wordpress, and that's a mouthful. michaelblackston.wordpress.com. You can go there, it'll go straight to my blog, and you can just cycle down the page and read them all. I will be very soon buying michaelblackston.com, and that's going to be my webpage where it's me, anything that has to do with me, whether it's my blog, it all kind of comes together on michaelblackston.com. And so that's coming. If you would like to write a blog, that's my suggestion to you, is to go to WordPress and start. You can always, I've heard some people say don't get a WordPress.com blog. Go ahead and buy hosting through WordPress.org and do all that. Well, there are a couple of problems with that. First of all, you got to pay for it. WordPress.com is free. You can buy the premium packages on WordPress.com, but it's limited. Although it's plenty for what you need to do to get started at free. Secondly, trying to design your website on WordPress, unless you know HTML code, is pretty difficult. I learned a lot recently when I was redoing the Q1 Go the Theater Show website. I learned a lot about, I don't want to even say a lot, I learned some stuff I didn't know. I got a little more knowledge in writing code, but because I started off with no knowledge, I do the drag and drop websites, and I find that is best for me and best for most people, unless you're just savvy enough to learn code or already know it. The templates on the WordPress.org sites they're just not real user-friendly compared to the site I use. I use Wix.com. I've used Yola before as well, but I like Wix. I like the user interface. I like how easy it is, the learning curve to use it. I mean, it took me a day, and I was making what I consider awesome-looking websites. They have a lot of tools. They're constantly adding new tools to their new stuff, and all you have to do is set up your free site. It's free, and yes, there are premium sites, and there are limitations to the free sites with this as well. Wix has premium sites, and they're not that bad, or premium plans. They're not that bad per month or per year, but for what I'm doing right now, I don't have to pay for it. The only thing I have to do is pay my yearly fee to GoDaddy.com to get the website that I want. And then I can turn around and mask that website so that when you go, for instance, if I have a Wix website I think it's blackstonbooks.wix or blackstonbooks.wix.com/C1G or something like, it's one long URL. But by going back to GoDaddy and buying q1go.com, what I'm able to do is bypass that long URL to get you there by going into it at GoDaddy and forwarding that easier q1go.com URL to the Wix site and masking it. So basically what happens is you type in q1go.com, it forwards straight to that URL, the long one, and when I mask it, all it does is it shows q1go.com at the top, and you're good to go. It's a lot prettier. You can do some other stuff through WordPress with a plugin called Pretty Links and all that, but I haven't gotten into that yet. So that's how you can do it yourself if you want to do it. But I highly suggest going free first because, listen, you're not going to use or lose your past posts. For one thing, if you're smart, you'll keep a database on your computer of your basic articles. Once they're on the internet, they're going to be there. So if you decide you need to go premium, say you have a blog that goes viral and thousands of people start watching it or reading it, and WordPress comes to you and says, you're getting way too much traffic for this free site and you have to go premium. Well, that's a good problem to have, but all you do is switch over to premium. You keep everything. It's not like you're going to have to start from scratch. You just switch over to premium and you have more options. So start free if you decide you're going to do it. See if it's something you're going to be consistent with, or if you're going to be another one of those bloggers that's fly by night, like I have been. Now, one of the ways you can stay consistent, this was one of the tips that I got, and it has been the key element to my excitement and I could stop right now and I could write all night long different blogs with different ideas. And here's how. When I first started blogging, and I would start up a blog, and I'm going to do it this way, and I'm going to be so excited about releasing them on a consistent basis, but I would release 2 or 3 of them, then I would not be able to think one day suddenly what to write. And that becomes infectious. I mean, it just keeps going. You might be able to squeeze something out that's kind of, I'll write about this because, okay, I can. I got to write about something, I'll write about this. And it just gets worse and worse until you get burned out. One way to avoid the burnout is before you start blogging, once you've realized the type of blog you want to do, sit down and make a list of at least 50 blog topics before you write a single word. 50 of them. Now, I sat down at a restaurant and I came up with 46. I couldn't think of another topic after 46. So I stopped. I said, that's close enough to 50. I'll round it up and say it's 50, and I'm sure I'll keep adding, because another thing they said when I researched this was you'll find that once you have your master list, as life happens, you'll keep running into topics that you want to talk about, and all you do is just keep adding them to the list, and usually you'll add more topics than you can keep up with. The list will grow rather than shorten, because you might write this week, you might write 2 blog posts, because for instance, I'm trying to release 2 blog posts a week. Well, if you keep your mind on it and you're constantly thinking about it, and you understand that everything you see in that niche in your daily life is something you can talk about and you can write it down, you'll start to see that list grow. You might write 2 this week, and you might add 4 to your list, or 6 or 10. The list just grows, and you'll probably find out that you can never get to the original list topics because you get so excited about this new one you thought about. But you always have a list of about 50 that you started with that you can fall back on. And if you have that time where you just can't think and you just can't figure out what to write about, you can go back to that list, reference it, and it's good to go. You got something to write about. Quickly, because I've recorded already a lot of time on this podcast rambling about the first 2 topics and at the intro, I want to talk about the last couple of things, and I'll keep them fairly short, I hope. I'm going to talk about getting healthy by walking, and you can too. I lost several pounds a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago. I really got on a program to where I was walking. I wanted to get at least some exercise, and my thought was I'm going to get my body used to the exercise, and I'm going to gradually ramp it up and add new exercises and add more types. Like right now, I said I'm going to start with walking, get my body used to it, then I'll add push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, and all that stuff as my body gets more and more healthy, and let it compound on each other. And I still think that's a good idea. But I worked myself up to walking 5 miles a day a couple of years ago, and I dropped the weight. You walk 5 miles a day, you're going to drop the weight. If you can put that into your schedule, for me, it's a little over 10,000 steps. I have a pedometer on my phone that will count my steps during the day and when I'm going to take my 5-mile walk. Now, when I say I'm walking 5 miles a day, I'm not counting the walking I'm doing during the day. I walk intentionally for an exercise stretch of time 5 miles. So I may get 15,000 steps because I walked 5,000 steps just during my normal day, and then got my 10,000 steps in during the walking time. But I did that for a couple of years, and then it got cold, and I went out one time, and I just about killed myself. I felt like it wasn't really that bad, but it felt like it. My lungs were so cold, I felt like I was freezing them, and I said, I'm going to get sick. I'm not going to do this again. And I got out of walking, and once I got out of it, it just didn't come back for a while. But my wife has been doing so well on her diet, and she's looking so good, and she's doing that for her health, but she's also doing it for me. And I thought, I owe it to her and my children to do it for my health, to be around for as long as I can for them, but also romantically for my wife. I need to get in shape for her. She deserves that. So I decided I'm going to do it again, and I hadn't put on really. Over time, I had put back 5 pounds of the 30 that I lost back on, or not 5, but 10. And I dropped 5 of those. So I really, starting back again now, am only 5 pounds above where I had gotten where I lost. But I've got about 20 to 25 pounds left to go. And I lose weight fast when I put my mind to it. So the fact that I am that far overweight just is a testament to my laziness. But I've decided to do it again, and I started this weekend in Myrtle Beach, because Conway, South Carolina, where I was working, is about 5 to 10 miles from Myrtle Beach. And this is the off season. We've just started the slow season. All of the hotels are relatively empty. There's hardly anybody on the beach, and especially in the evening after the workday ends, when the sun's going down, the beach is empty. And I said, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to walk on the beach, because when I was doing this the first time, when I would go to Myrtle Beach and work, that was one of my favorite things to do. I actually would get 20,000 steps in. I would walk 10 miles a day, because I would go to Broadway at the beach and I would walk 5 miles there. Then I would be ready for a rest. I would get in my car and drive a couple of miles to the beach. And by that time, I was good and rested, and I would walk on the beach for another 5 miles. Well, when that quit, when I quit walking, that quit too. So now I've started again, and I started Thursday night, and I walked Thursday night, and I walked my 5 miles, and I walked last night. I walked my 5 miles, a little over 5 miles last night, actually, because I couldn't find my little inlet back to my car between the hotels. When it gets dark, everything looks the same. I mean, it's well lit on the beach from the lights from the hotels, but I just walked for probably 500 steps too far when I was heading back. But I feel so much better, and you can too. And so that's kind of what this little segment of the podcast is dedicated to. I want you, if you have a weight problem and you have struggled with it for so long and you can't figure anything out to do, let me encourage you to start slowly and allow yourself to take the time. You've probably heard it a million times. The weight didn't come on overnight. It's not going to go off overnight. Allow yourself the luxury of not feeling guilty because you're not losing weight in a week. And one of the best ways to do that is to walk. It's true, you need to work on your diet, you need to eat a good diet, you need to get some cardio in. But are you doing that now? No. Start slow, start small, and it can start with just a walk. I promise you, if you will start walking 2 miles a day, if you will add 2 miles a day, and if I can do 5, you can do 2, depending on how overweight you are. I mean, you do want to consult a doctor and find out what's too much. But if you think you can walk a couple of miles, walk a couple of miles a day. It doesn't take that long at all to walk a couple of miles a day. And do you realize how much better your body is going to feel, and you'll start losing a little weight if you'll do what you're doing now and then add 2 miles a day? Just walking. What you'll realize before too long is that your body starts craving more exercise, and you'll say, you know what, I'm going to push it a little further. I'm going to push it a little further. That's what I did. I started with 3 miles, and then I worked it up to 5, and simply because of the time, I keep it at 5, and 5 miles a day is plenty for a walk. But it's one of those things that if you put your mind to it, you can get that exercise in no matter where you are at any point in the season. I could have found places to walk in the winter, but I got lazy when I dropped off this last time. That's all it was laziness. I have no other excuse. So pick up some walking. You'll find that your body will thank you for it, and you'll start feeling lighter, you'll start feeling stronger, and when you take walks like that and you get your blood flowing and moving, you'll also find you want more healthy dietary things like water instead of tea or Coke. Those things are great. And when you're sitting on your butt on a summer afternoon, nothing like a cold glass of sweet tea. But if you take a walk and then come back and there's a huge glass of ice water waiting for you on the back porch, or you walk in and pour yourself some cold water from the pitcher in the in the refrigerator, nothing's more refreshing than that. And you'll start realizing that you're craving the good things because your body knows what it needs, and it will start craving the things that it needs if you'll put a little exercise into your diet. So do that. And then lastly, this is something you can do too, but I don't advise it. You've probably, or maybe you've heard me talk about my ingrown toenail. I'm not going to go into how it happened. I can't remember. I know I have talked about it, but I can't remember if it's one of those that I've decided not to release. But I'll just tell you that a toenail cutting error on my part led to an ingrown toenail, where a sharp, pointy, spear-like portion of toenail was growing into the meat of the front part of my toe and causing me immense pain. The problem was I couldn't take it to the doctor to have cut out right away because I don't have insurance at the time. I'm about to have it, thank goodness, but at the time I didn't have any insurance, and so I was going to have to save about $450. That's a rounded up number. I think it was $425, but I was also allowing for, having to buy some pain meds or something like that. So I said around about $450, and they weren't going to let me do a payment plan. And there was a specific podiatrist that I wanted to go to because I was told they were very good about keeping the pain to a minimum when they did it. And I'm just going to tell you, if you've got an ingrown toenail or pain in your toe, you just don't realize. If you don't have it, you don't realize how painful that is until you get it. It is awful. And the fact is that all of your weight is pushed onto your feet as you walk. So the worse it gets, your body has to handle all of your upper body weight, and it transfers to your feet, and a lot of that to that area of the toe, and it hurts so badly. To the point that after we had returned from Orlando, and I had gotten through that okay, it really started hurting really badly, even more badly than it had been. And my son was wanting to go do some stuff, and I got to the point where for a couple of days I couldn't do much more than sit down. I could walk around the house, and I wasn't limping too much, but as far as going and running around or going geocaching, I need to do an episode about geocaching, which is something he likes to do now with me. I couldn't do it. I kept having to say, son, I can't, and the look on his face with his dad not being able to do stuff. I'm on the road all the time. I need to be able to do stuff with my son. It really got me down, and I decided enough is enough. Every night there was kind of a little bit of a crack in the top of my toe where it was growing and an opened wound. I don't mean to gross you out. So I was constantly having to keep it medicated, keep it cleaned, and keep it bandaged. And at night, I would lay in the bathtub and allow the faucet to lightly trickle very hot water with just enough pressure to keep it, to rinse it over the time that I had it there and clean it out good. But I would get it as hot as I could stand it, because the heat would alleviate the pain. It would just kind of numb it. So on this night that I had gotten sick of it, I decided I've had enough, and I looked at it, and because it had been under the water, it was nice and clean. And I realized that if I took some toenail clippers and got up under the nail, under the part where it wasn't ingrown, and lifted the entire nail up, that the sliver that was growing into the meat of my toe would actually come up and out a little bit of the open crack in the toe. Because of the way it was growing, the toe, the little open wound could not heal because there was enough of that shard, right there at the surface. So I realized if I can do that, and if I can make myself stand the pain, I may be able to get toenail clippers in there and get that shard out. Once I get that shard out, I will be able to alleviate most of this pain. One other problem I had, though, was that a little flap of flesh had started growing over the top of my toe just due to the way everything had happened. And it was very, very sore. And the only problem was that I couldn't get to everything the way I needed to without that flap being gone. So that's kind of how the surgery started. I got a razor blade, sterilized everything, and I used a razor blade and 2 toenail clippers. I used the little knife part on the middle of a toenail clipper that you use, I guess, to dig out toe jam or whatever, to lift it up, and then the other one to clip. But first I had to get rid of that meat over the top of the toe. So I told my son not to come in unless blood started coming out from under the door or he heard me screaming. And I sterilized everything, and I got in the tub, ran that hot water onto the toe as I did it, and I performed surgery on that toe. Yes, it was painful, very painful. But I had just decided I'd had enough, and I knew that once I cut, it was an open wound anyway. Like I said, it wasn't healing, so it wasn't like I was creating more surface for infection other than cutting off that little flap of skin. And the flap of skin was not that big, but it was enough that, I could feel it as I was cutting it off. And it bled a lot. But once I got it done and kept it under the water so that I could see what I was doing, I was able to get to the shard that was in my toe, clip it off clean, and then wrap my toe. And I applied pressure to my toe to stop the bleeding, and within 5 minutes it had stopped. So that's what I did. And then I got fussed at by everybody, from my mother to my wife to my son to, you don't need to do that. You're going to cause infection. You're going to have to. Well, like I said before, it was already not healing. This would at least give it an opportunity to heal. And if I hadn't gotten an infection before, I wasn't doing anything more that was going to give me an infection. So I figured once I was through the pain, I would be glad, and I absolutely was glad. So it's possible. You have to look at your situation, and I do not recommend. Let this disclaimer rise above the noise. Don't do anything without consulting a doctor. It's really not a good idea. Do not think for 1 second that I am telling you to go do self-surgery of any sort in this podcast. I'm just telling you what I did. And although it did work, I do, because of the way everything is now, I'm going to have to keep a close eye on that toenail and make sure I keep it cut back so that it doesn't grow into the toe. I probably still need to go to the professional, have them look at it and see if there's anything else that needs to be done. But at least for now, the pain is gone, and I am able to live a happy foot life at the moment. So that's all I've got for this podcast. It's been a lot. It's been a mouthful, but I think I got everything in it that I wanted to talk to you about. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've got something you'd like to share with me, well, you can do that several ways by getting in touch with me. First, you can call me. I have a hotline. The hotline number is 706-389-0401. That's 706-389-0401. If you do call it, just make sure you remember to reference the Road Noise podcast. Now, I just listened to it to make sure I had the number right, and I listened to the outgoing message that's my voice, and it mentions C1G or Q1 Go podcast only. Don't let that throw you. I'm Michael Blackston, so you'll hear me say, hi, I'm Mike Blackston. So although at this point, if you call in, it doesn't say Road Noise, at least leave your message, and that'll be good. Just reference the Road Noise podcast, although I am getting ready to change that outgoing message to include the Road Noise podcast. Secondly, if you would like to email me, you can also email me at roadnoisepodcast@gmail.com. That's just my email address, and I'll respond to you just as quick as I get it. You can visit the website. I highly suggest you visit the website as I add new stuff to it. I'm going to add that resource page. You can stream the show directly from there. It's a great way if you're telling somebody about the show and you would like them to take a listen, just tell them roadnoisepodcast.com. That's the easiest way to do it, and all of the resources will be there, including if they want to subscribe, say on iTunes or something like that. There's an iTunes link, and I'll be putting the RSS link there too. So all of that stuff will be there. Go to roadnoisepodcast.com. You can check us out on Facebook. I would love for you to like our Facebook page at facebook.com/roadnoise. And if you're an artist, there's another Facebook page that I'm trying to grow. It's actually not a page, it's a group. And I almost shut it down the other day, but when I made the mention to all of the members that I was getting ready to shut it down because I was the only one that ever posted anything in it, they rose up. They begged me not to shut it down, and they began to post, and now it's really going well, and I really appreciate everybody. If you're a member of My Everything Arts, I really appreciate everything you've done, and let's keep it up. But facebook.com/myeverythingarts is the Facebook group. I'd love for you to join us. If you do, send me a message and tell me you heard about it through the Road Noise podcast. I am the administrator, and I do have to approve you, but assuming you're not some spam robot or putting extremely offensive stuff on there, you'll get approved. If you don't, it means I saw something on your profile, because I'll check out your profile before I approve you. I think I've had 2 people in the last year that have asked to join that didn't get joined, and it's because they were spam robots. So check us out there as well. And then the last thing is check out the blog. I mentioned the blog earlier in the show, but I'm going to tell you that again. It's michaelblackston.wordpress.com. Check it out, and do me a favor, share it if you like it. I'm not going to ask you to share it if you don't like it. If it's the type of thing that doesn't interest you, or you don't know somebody who'd be interested, by all means, do not share it. I don't want you to do it just as a favor. But if you do like it, take the extra time to share it. Same thing with this podcast. It's the best way to help me grow, and I don't ask for money, so I can't ask for shares. That's the one thing I can do. So I'm asking you to do that. If you're listening to me on iTunes, I would love it if you'd be kind enough to give me a review. Other than that, until next time, I'm Michael Blackston. This is Road Noise. Thanks for sharing the passenger seat with me as we learn to live life 1 mile at a time.